How's it going, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome to a brand new and updated deck profile for Satellarknight for August of 2020. Recently got a bit of inspiration to film an update for this deck and kind of mess around with it again. It's just always one of those really fun and simple control-based strategies that is kind of near and dear to me because it's very nostalgic. It's one of the first decks I played when I got back into the game in Duelist Alliance format. And still happy to see that it has been, unchained by that of Master Rule 5 or Master Rule 4 revision, whatever you want to call it, unchained in that sense, and that you can summon Xyz monsters and, of course, in the main monster zone. You guys already know this, those that are watching this, for the Satellarknights solely, to see what my list looks like. But yeah, made some changes in the trap lineup, some slight tweaks within the extra deck. There's a few other things I want to talk about within the main deck that you can sort of change out, and things that I've been kind of on the fence about. Yeah, without further ado, we'll get into the profile. But I also want to mention, if you guys do want to help support the channel, there's a few ways you can do so. One is by checking out Imperium Duelist down in the description below. You'll find a link to their site where you can get playmats like this, sleeves like you see me using here on the main deck, or dice like these, themed after classic spells and traps like MST and Scapegoat here, and they've got many other designs. You guys can get all of this stuff and more for 10% off using that discount code WinterKills10 off at checkout. And if you guys are buying anything on TCG Player, whether it be a Satellarknight deck, whatever it may be, don't forget to use that affiliate link to TCG Player, first link down in the description, and you guys can help support the channel just by shopping on TCG Player and checking out. By using that link, a small bit of the revenue from your purchase goes right back to the channel. And if you want deck profiles early, other behind-the-scenes photos, and things like that, consider hitting that blue join button down below also for more information. So let's go ahead and get into the profile here. And for the monsters, we have 3 Deneb, then following that 3 Altair, and then following that, of course, 3 Anunkuli, and then 2 Satellarknight Vega, which has been pretty much the running standard for Satellarknight monsters ever since this deck's inception, I'm pretty sure, which is pretty crazy to think about it, actually. But then we have 3 Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, and that rounds out a whopping 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 card monster lineup. Now we'll move into the spells, where it's not that much more impressive, where we have 3 copies of Pot of Desires, 2 copies of Satellarknight Skybridge, 1 Upstart Goblin, and 1 reinforcement of the army. So we're running pretty low on spells, but that's fine because we make up for it in the trap department, where we're starting with 3 copies of Call of the Haunted. And then moving on from there, we have 3 Stellar Nova Alpha, 3 copies of Crackdown, 3 copies of Solemn Strike, 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device, 1 Oasis of Dragon Souls, 2 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, and last but not least, 1 copy of Imperial Order. And with that, that rounds out our trap lineup and also our 40 card main deck. And now we'll head into the extra deck, where you might have guessed is all Xyz monsters. And starting with the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Stellarknight Triver, obviously the star of the show. 2 copies of Dark Tellarknight Battle Mias, 1 Stellarknight Deltarose, and 1 Stellarknight Constellar Diamond. And then moving on, we have 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 number 39 Utopia with 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 1 Evil Swarm Maxiton Knight, 1 Castel the Sky Blaster Musketeer, 1 Karagorgon the Anti-Luminescent Knight, and 1 number 41 Baguzga the Terribly Tired Tapir. And that rounds out our extra deck. Now we'll go in and basically go through the deck profile again, a lot slower, but a lot more in depth, and sort of explain all my card choices. So first and foremost here, we have 3 copies of the Stellarknight Deneb. This is the Stratos of the deck. Basically, if it is summoned, you can add a Satellarknight monster from your deck to your hand. So, obviously, for those that don't know, this is a very slow-paced control deck. We're not going to Assault to go off and do combos. We're just basically normal summoning, setting a bunch of traps, and playing on the opponent's turn, and then going into some of our very powerful Xyz monsters to try to control the pace of the game from then on out. But Satellarknight Deneb is great is that it can grab our follow-ups for the next turn, whether they be copies of Altair or copies of an Uncle Vega, whatever we really need going into the future turns. But again, just consistency and Stratos. So what else could you ask for? Then moving on, 3 Satellarknight Altair, basically the wolf bark of the deck. When it is summoned, we can special summon a Satellarknight monster from our graveyard, except itself. But then we can, not special summon monsters or cannot attack with monsters this turn except for Satellarknight monsters. So that's the one restriction that it has there. The monster that does summon does come out in defense position, but it really isn't too big of a deal because you're probably always going to be going into a Satellarknight play anyways. It's important, to use this guy on your turn to go up into quick rank 4s, but also to use it during the opponent's turn, just to build a big board that they're going to have harder time getting through, and that will leave you with some stuff to work with during your next turn. So there really isn't too much to say overall about the standard Satellarknight lineup. It's just consistency. This card you'll need throughout the entire game. Same thing with the Neb. So you just want to have as many as you possibly can. And then we have 3 Anukulai. This card in some cases is almost better to start your turn with than that of Deneb, especially if you pair it with Call the Haunted or Oasis of the Dragon Souls, because you can use this to dump your Deneb to the graveyard, or any Satellarknight card rather, but you're usually going to be dumping Deneb, or in some cases you could dump Vega if you have an Altair in hand, and things like Oasis of the Dragon Souls or Call the Haunted set, just so it allows you for a good graveyard setup. Really not much else outside of that. And then we have 2 copies of Vega. Vega is not the greatest. I wish they'd foil bump this card already. It's been, almost 6 years at this point, but I digress. Vega basically just summons a Satellarknight monster from the hand when summoned, and just basically helps to go along with the daisy chain summoning, techniques that this deck likes to take advantage of. For example, Vega into Altair, and then Altair into Deneb, and then Deneb searches Altair to sort of repeat the process for next turn. They just sort of all play off of each other. But Vega is good, but it isn't. In some cases, if you do have to go second, this card can be great to help get itself on the board, or going second, this card can be great to help set up quick rank 4 plays to be able to get cards like Deneb or Anuk on the field on top of itself, to be able to, again, access cards like Castel, Tornado Dragon, or Battle Myas to be able to go into Travere, or Exciton Knight, again, whatever you really need. I wouldn't max out on this card, just because drawing multiples really isn't that great. I mean, arguably you could say the same thing for all of the other Satellarknights, but Vega's just one of those cards that I feel like, is fine at 2 and really always has been. This has been sort of like the gold standard lineup of Satellarknight monsters, again, like since this deck's inception. Other cards you can play is the Cirrus, I believe, which is the one that's sort of like Pot of Avarice. But I feel like Pot of Avarice is just a little bit too slow for this deck. As nice as it seems, in theory, I just feel like, again, it's just too slow for this deck as is, and I just really would rather not play it. And then the last monsters we have is just 3 Ash Blossom, just because you want to have at least some say in your opponent's turn going second, and it can help back up your first turn boards and basically allow your hand to do things it wouldn't be able to do otherwise. That's why I like the Ash in there. You could play Ogre, you play Valor, you play Gamma, whatever you want. But moving on to the spells, 3 Pot of Desires, just consistency for consistency's sake. I've seen some people play Cardinamize. I just do not like that card in here whatsoever. I'd love to just max out on the 3 Desires. Very unlikely to banish all of the Satellarknights, mathematically very unlikely. Again, you just need to see Satellarknights or your turn isn't that productive. So Pot of Desires helps us get there, however else you want to look at it. 2 Skybridge. This card is actually pretty neat. I almost considered going to 3, but just really don't see a reason why. I mean, I do see some reason, obviously for Pot of Desire's sake, but basically it says target one Tellarknight monster you control, special summon one Tellarknight monster with a different name from your deck, and if you do, shuffle the targeted monster into the deck. While the monster special summoned by this effect is face up in the field, you cannot special summon monsters except Tellarknight monsters. You can only activate once the Tellarknight Skybridge per turn. So yeah, this card can basically help dodge hand traps in a sense. Like if you open up like Deneb and they have Valor, chain the Skybridge to the Valor, and then that target for Valor is no longer there. So you can dodge some hand traps in a sense, but it can also turn cards like Vega or Altair turn 1 into cards like Deneb and Anuk, which serve better purpose turn 1 than either Vega or Altair. So just a pretty useful card that can sort of help tag out certain Tellarknights into better ones. Upstart to help us get down obviously below that 40 card mark. Reinforcement Army just to act as any Tellarknight whenever we need it. And then into the traps, which is where a lot of very important interactions lie, and that is of course within the continuous trap. Continuous traps are extremely important to this deck, and for those that don't know why, I'll explain. For those that do know, you know. Call the Haunted is probably one of the best trap cards in this deck because we do have a lot of ways to play on the opponent's turn, and of course Call the Haunted helps us do that. Again, cards like Anunculai that send Tellarknight cards to the graveyard, ideally things like Deneb. So we can use cards like Call the Haunted to spring its effect during our opponent's turn to search cards like Altair to, basically ensure we actually have a follow-up going into the next turn, whether it be another card like Altair for another search or a card like Vega to get cards out of her hand and onto the field to make plays with. So Call the Haunted is great for that reason, and of course it pairs well with Triver, because when Triver is summoned, it returns all other cards on the field of the hand, so it helps us recycle all continuous traps. So just know going forward, if we're playing continuous traps, it's because Triver has good synergy with them and allows us to reuse them. So 3 Call the Haunted, and then we have 3 Stellar Nova Alpha, basically the in-engine, in-archetype Solemn Judgment. Basically, when a spell, trap card, or monster effect is activated, send one face-up Tellarknight monster control to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card, then draw 1 card. So basically, send off a Tellarknight, negate it, draw a card. So it helps you sort of break even off that interaction of having to tribute away the monster to use it, but been a mainstay for the deck. Very, very good card, 100%. Helps back up your already sort of not so big fields and make them a little bit more powerful. 3 Crackdown, again, great disruption against a lot of combo decks. Sometimes taking their normal summon can just be outright enough, and they really can't complete their combo from there on out. Obviously, that's not going to be every situation, but again, it can be a very impactful card played in the right position or played at the right time. And again, it is a continuous trap, so we can recycle it with that of Triver to reuse over and over again. Next up, we have 3 Solemn Strike, which I almost wanted to be 3 copies of Fiendish Chain instead, because Fiendish Chain, like Crackdown and Call the Haunted, is a continuous. But Solemn Strike is a very, very good card nonetheless. It's basically like, 3 more copies of Alpha, and can be pretty helpful, at least going into boards, because, this card can help break those boards without really breaking the bank in terms of life points. But again, I'm kind of on the fence about like this and Fiendish Chain. I might go with Fiendish Chain just because, again, it is continuous and we can help bounce things back. But Solemn Strike, I feel like, has a bit more impact as a card going first. Then we have 3 Compulse. Not a continuous, but it's fine. I really want removal in this deck because sometimes Triver isn't enough and you can't summon Triver during the opponent's turn. So Compulse is a really good card to help get big problematic cards out of your way. It's chainable defense, so we can just outright use it whenever we need to. We don't have to wait for a specific window to be there in order for us to play this card. We can simply just use it whenever, or we can even use it to bounce back at our own cards if it fits us in that specific situation. 1 Oasis of Dragon Soul is basically acting as the 4th copy of Call the Haunted to basically increase our chances of not banishing all copies of Call the Haunted off of our Pot of Desires, leaving us with at least, a revival trap in the deck. Then next up we have 2 Anti-Spell Fragrance just because of the combo hate. And same thing applies with the Imperial Order. I'd play 3 Order if we had 3. But might as well just be a 3rd fragrance that complements the other 2 fragrances quite well. And it's a 3 of essentially These cards are basically the same in a nutshell. So again, it decreases the chances of them all being banished off of that of Pot of Desires. So that concludes the card by card for the main deck. Now we'll take a look into the extra deck. And like I said, the star of the show is Satellarknight Triver, without a doubt. 3 level 4 Satellarknight monsters. During the turn you Ixie summon this card. You cannot special summon monsters except Satellarknight monsters. If this card is Ixie summoned, return all other cards in the field to the hand. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Ixie's material from this card. Send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. If this card with Ixie's material is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Satellarknight monster in your graveyard, special summon it. So again, like I said earlier, the continuous trap synergy is there like you wouldn't believe with this card, because we can just bounce them all back to reuse. And again, one of the more powerful interactions is that with an Imperial Order. You play this during their turn, to slow their turn down greatly, right? And then during your turn, you pay the 700 and then just bounce this back, and you're free to play your spells however you'd like. And then you reset the order, and just it sort of loops out from there. And you get to sort of take a random card out of their hand too. Maybe it's the out they needed for the order, whatever it may be. And then if it hits the grave, it can float, which is very advantageous to sort of keep up your deck's engine. Then we have 2 Batlamias. This basically helps you get into cards like Triver, like Deltaros a lot easier with only needing 2 level 4 monsters. Then next up we have 1 Satellarknight Deltaros, basically a little bit of in-engine spot removal. While this card has Ixie material, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when you normal or special summon a monster or monsters. So it does have great built-in protection for your normal or special summons. Then it says once per turn you can detach an Ixie material from this card, then target 1 card in the field and destroy it. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Satellarknight monster from your hand or deck. Then next up we have the Satellarknight Constellar Diamond, which is actually low-key probably one of the most powerful cards within the extra deck. It's always pretty funny to me how Satellarknights has access to this really good floodgate card against a lot of dark strategies. And it's just always been that way. And when this card first came out, it was really, really powerful against Shaddoll, and still could be powerful against Shaddoll potentially, and things like BA or whatever. Any dark strategy for that matter, really. And that says 3 or more level 5 light monsters, but we're not really summoning it that way. You can summon it via its own effect or summon it using the Dark Satellarknight Batlamias over here. So there's more than one way is to summon it without summoning it the correct way. But it says during your main phase 2, you can also Ixie summon this card by using a Satellarknight Ixie's monster control as Ixie's material, except itself. And then it says while this card is Ixie's material, neither player can send cards from the deck to the graveyard, and any card that returns from the graveyard to the hand is banished instead. During either player's turn, when an opponent's dark monster activates its effect, you can attach 1 Ixie's material from this card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So this card is loaded with some pretty good effects, and outright could just be just the right floodgate against some decks. Tornado Dragon now. We're getting into just sort of our generic rank 4 pool, as we do have a fantastic rank 4 toolbox. So Tornado Dragon for the back row removal. Abyss Dweller, really nothing to be said about it. Utopia and Utopia Lightning to get over big monsters and help push for a game. You could play double or nothing in here and play Utopia double, but I just don't like the idea of adding a 1-of into the deck that's probably going to get banished off Desires most of the time, and just is going to contribute to brick hands, which is this deck does not and really cannot afford. Evil Swarm Exciton Knight for the board wipes. Castel for just more removal. Karen Gorgon for help protecting your floodgates like Anti-Spell or Imperial Order or Crackdown, whatever it may be. And then we have Baguzga for sort of the plan B that most people know it for. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for the updated Satellarknight deck profile for August of 2020. Pretty solid standard list. There really isn't so much change with the Satellarknight strategy. I hope this deck gets support at some point in the future. Maybe another main deck Satellarknight monster. Something that can help it just extend a little further. Because right now it lacks extenders very, very severely. But it's never really been a combo deck, so I guess it makes sense that it doesn't really have one. Maybe it'll give us some more Satellarknight traps to work with. That could also be pretty great. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. I'll touch on the side deck, I guess, real quick. The only thing I would side really would just be back row hate, or not back row hate, combo hate, essentially. A lot of going second cards. You could also side things like Heavy Storm Duster if you had to go against another back row heavy matchup, where you could potentially side out Fragrances and Order against decks like Subterror, whatever it may be. Or you could also side out potentially, the Oasis, a copy of the, Compulse, or all of the strikes if you're going second. Put in Dark Lunar, Forbidden Droplet, 3T, Super Polymerization, whatever it may be. Super Poly is another card I guess I'll touch on real quick that could be main in this deck because there's a lot of space in the extra deck. Arguably, the only thing you really need in the extra deck that's like kind of mandatory are the Satellarknight monsters themselves. I think this is a pretty solid lineup. Everything else is kind of, whatever goes. I would say the Extra Knight's pretty important to have because it's kind of an alternative to Triver to get into if you happen to be out of them. But yeah, I guess if you also really wanted to be spicy, you could put like Elder Entity Entis in here if to play, to counter essentially like Dogmatica, because again, you have a lot of free space in the extra deck. So if they Maximus you can just like dump 2 Entis and like pop some of their stuff and kind of troll them that way if you really wanted to. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this deck profile. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, and of course, as always, Winter Kills signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And last but not least, a special thanks to my Divine Level channel members, Academic Thick, Travis Harris, and Zors. Thank you guys so much for continuing to generously support the channel.